countries, like everybody else in the world, move through this period of continued uncertainty, it is difficult to get those travel measures absolutely right. You can open up and then have to shut down, and then open up and have to shut down. And some people say, well, better to stay shut because that's more consistent. But it's also not making any progress. So how do you make progress with opening up national and international economies? How you do that in a way that's least risky, but how do you do that in a way that you can pull back if you need to, slow down or reverse? And that's the conundrum we're facing, both in terms of national travel and international travel at the moment. But continuing to keep international borders sealed is not necessarily a sustainable strategy for the world's economy, for the world's poor, or for anybody else. So we really do have to make progress on beginning to do that, but do it in a way that is least risky. And we're working very closely with member states on that. We're working with the travel industry and others. But it is very difficult to have a global one-size-fits-all policy, because the nature of risk and the nature of the impact is so determined by the local context and by the national or subnational situation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ryan. The next question goes to Tony from China Global Television Network. Tony, could you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, thank you. My question is just sort of going on this theme that Dr. Ryan has been bringing up, as when the pressure is relieved, that the virus has these opportunities to spread, and certainly we're seeing these infections rolling across parts of Europe. And governments have been very hesitant. Some of them have even come out outright and said that these national lockdowns that we saw the first time around in March, that these are going to be avoided at all costs, and they're taking this very hyper localized approach. And I just wonder now, and you've touched upon this a little bit already, as we're in the height of the summer season, you have people streaming across borders at very high rates, whether or not this localized approach is really what's needed right now, if there needs to be a more cohesive approach at the federal or national level, if we're going to be able to strike this balance.
Yeah, I think you're correct. In some sense, you've answered your own question. It's striking that balance between what is national or federal strategy and what is local implementation. In a sense, you fight what you see, and the only people who really see what's happening are at local, but you can't just react to what you see locally. You have to be guided by what's happening nationally. And the best, in the most effective countries, what you see is a seamless relationship between a national strategy being implemented, but with the local flexibility to be tactical in reaction to the disease. And finding that balance between well laid out national strategies that lay out the objective, lay out the approaches, fund and support those approaches, but give local actors and local authorities the maximum authority to be able to implement as they see on the ground. I think that's the right balance to strike. It's very understandable that no country in the world that's been through a lockdown wants to go back there. Who wants to go back to a full lockdown? There are huge economic and other consequences from that. And again, I think we've said quite consistently that there are choices in that. The lower the level of virus is, and some countries very much succeeded with very, very stringent lockdowns to really suppress virus levels to very low. And as they've opened up, even those countries have seen small rises in cases and clusters of cases occurring. And they're now reacting to those cases and clusters. And that may be the future. We may be in a situation where we're having to react to cases and clusters. We may see community transmission emerge from some of those clusters. And we may have to shut down or pull back on mobility and mixing in those local areas. And in the end, if we leave aside the word lockdown, because it's become a charged term, what do we mean? We mean there are certain areas in which...
Microphone,
please. Where disease is transmitting efficiently at community level. Where you see that disease begin to become efficient and it's moving easily between people, what do? What you want to do is put distance between people. You want to stop people mixing as much as they were before. The virus loves when people mix, because when people mix, the virus moves. So if you know where the virus is and you can say, yes, we have community transmission in this area, then you can reduce mixing in that area. So it again comes back to, do you understand where the virus is? What is the level of detail of your knowledge of the virus epidemiology in your country at national, subnational and local level? If you can understand the dynamics of transmission and be very precise in your disease understanding, you can be very precise in your response. It's like in surgery with the, you know, if you think about people who have brain surgery, surgeons very often use microscopes so they can actually work at a much finer level. And we've seen huge increases in people surviving from brain surgery because we are much more precise in the surgery we can carry out in those cases. And it's the same thing here. The more we understand the disease, the more we have a microscope on the virus, the much more precise we can be in surgically removing that virus from our communities. But if we don't know where the virus is, if we just have this broad community transmission, then we have to take very broad-based measures. And in that situation, that hurts the economy. So again, I would emphasize that, number one, communities have it in their power to reduce transmission by their behaviour, and authorities have it in their power to really, really ramp up surveillance, testing, tracing, tracking, in order to understand where the disease is and take the appropriate measures. And if countries do that, and if they are able to do that at a subnational level, then possibly we can avoid the worst of these so-called lockdowns occurring in the future. Maria?
Just a quick note on the solidarity that we've seen across borders. I mean, I think in this particular area, highlighting the question that you just mentioned, we've seen this really, and I don't know if DG wants to comment on this as well, but we've seen a lot of countries come together and work together on, here's the solution that we're working on in our country, here are the measures that we have put in place in our country, here's the situation in terms of disease transmission we see in our country, what does this mean for us, what does this mean for the countries that border us? And we've seen really incredible work together and unity and solidarity together to come to a solution. Because this virus does not respect borders. It doesn't respect, how we've set up our landmarks. And so we need more of this, I think, and I think we will continue to need countries to work together, to find solutions together, because, as we've said many, many times, if the virus is circulating, no one is safe until we're all safe. So again, we just encourage that level of collaboration as we work through as this pandemic evolves. We're going to have to figure this out together, how we open up these travel corridors in terms of the disease risk between countries. But again, it's really nice to see the solidarity across countries.
Thank you very much, Dr. Van Kerkhove and Dr. Ryan. Our next question goes to Anna Gross of the Financial Times. So Anna, can you unmute yourself and please go ahead.
Hi there, thanks for taking my question. When, if at all, do you expect the WHO team in China to present findings on the origin of COVID-19? And when they do, will they meet with the press in Beijing?
Well, I could start. So the team that's in China right now is our pre-team. It's a group, 2 people from WHO who are meeting with Chinese counterparts to plan a larger international mission. So they're still having meetings face-to-face, and these are constructive discussions about what the larger mission will look like in terms of its activities and in terms of its composition. And again, it will be an international mission with members of different disciplines as well as Chinese counterparts. So they're still having those discussions, and they're planning when that international mission will take place.
Thank you, Dr. Van Kerkhove. I think that answers the question very well. And we'll now go on to John Zarakostas of The Lancet. John, please unmute yourself and ask your question. I think we've lost John. John?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you very well now. Please ask your question.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to follow up on the introduction by Dr. Tedros with regards to hepatitis C. You mentioned, sir, that the medicines are still very expensive and out of reach in many countries. I was wondering if your experts that are present today, if they can shed some light, what is the average cost of the 12-week treatment in high-income countries, middle-income, and low-income countries, and what are the major impediments preventing access to a cure?
Thank you very much for that question. And of course, there's been enormous progress in the field of hepatitis C, where we have a series of direct-acting antivirals, or the DAAs they're called, that can treat all different kinds of genotypes across the world, and they've been made much less expensive over time. So the price range is now for a full course of both testing, a 12-week treatment of what we call a pan-genotypic treatment for all different hepatitis C types, and then a follow-on viral load test to ensure that they have suppressed the virus. That can range from as high as $3,000 in the past and down now in many countries ranging around $60 all in. So in many ways, we now have prices that will allow us to end hepatitis C, and this is essentially a cure if we can find all those other millions of people who have not yet been identified. So it's a great opportunity for us to try to move forward and try to find what we call on World Hepatitis Day, find the missing millions and identify, test, treat, and those persons will no longer pass the virus on to others, and we can find a functional cure for hepatitis C.
Thank you, Dr. Doherty. The next question, for that very comprehensive answer, the next question goes to Ana Pinto from Folha de São Paulo in Brazil. Ana, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Margaret. Thank you for taking my question. Dr. Ryan, I'd like to ask if you could update us on the situation of Spain. Spain has been all over the media because there have been spikes there since the beginning of July. But as far as the Sunday's WHO situation report, there are only clusters there. So I'd like to know if Spain would be more like Japan or Australia, where the government is being transparent, and because there are only clusters, it's not so dangerous, or if you think it's really worrisome, the situation that the number of cases that are growing now. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question. The situation in Spain, as you've seen, is associated with a series of clusters and some community transmission across a number of different areas, mainly centred on Catalonia in the north east of Spain. And again, as measures have been relaxed and mobility has increased, we've seen the number of cases rise. But the situation is nowhere close to what it was there before. And the authorities certainly assure us that they're taking every possible measure to investigate and suppress clusters and taking localized action to suppress those new clusters of disease. So I think Spain has developed a very sensitive surveillance system. It's able to detect these clusters very quickly, and again is very open and transparent about how it communicates those clusters to its population so people can take action. So I think it will take a number of days or weeks for us to see what is the future in Spain, but we trust that with this open approach, with this sensitive surveillance, with the sustained testing, and with the cooperation of people in Spain, that we will see these clusters come under control in due course. But complacency is not an option, and we do not believe that the government of Spain is being complacent. In fact, quite the opposite. They're being responsible and being very open and aggressive in their surveillance strategy for the country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ryan. And on that note, I think it's time to close this press briefing. I'll just hand over to the Director General for final remarks.
Just make one other point, because Meg spoke really well on hepatitis C, but just a shout out to all those people who were working on hepatitis B for so long, 20 years now, and to see, you know, incidents less than 1% in children is just, it is incredible. And I think sometimes the unsung heroes, and we see the impact that vaccination can have